Okay, hello. All right, welcome to the very first episode of 3rdBall podcast. My name is Jacob North, and we are here in the Delano Public Library over in Minnesota, and I'm here with my sort of co-host. I'll let him introduce himself.
My name's Stephen Patzner.
And we're going to talk about a few things here. In particular, self-improvement through things like diet and fitness, replacing bad habits with healthy habits, and knowing joy and how to have joy and how to get reacquainted with joy, especially through the trials and tribulations of a long life. So Stephen and I are both kind of here to bring you our stories, in particular Stephen's stories. And I'll let Stephen kind of explain how this happened, how this started, and why we're kind of sitting here bringing this to you right now.
Well, the best thing I can say, and what brings this about, is I have a driver's license picture in my pocket that I can show everybody if you want to see it. Not real proud of it. I was a very large man. I was in at about 300 pounds. I weigh about 173 right now. Very proud of my weight loss, but it was kind of a going in through the back door and finding myself that brought about the changes in my life. I did some research, but more than anything, what brings me here today is so many people have asked me to somehow convey to people how I did it in some form or another, whether it be a YouTube video, someone suggested a podcast, that's what brings us here today, or something to just basically tell people my story and where I was at. In the AA program, they always talk about where you were at, what happened in your life to make a change, and where you're at right now. So let's go with that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, and we're just going to kind of go through some stories and
here. Right. Let's go with the first thing I noticed about telling people when they would ask me to tell my story, and what I told Jacob, which brings us here again today. But I told people that people would ask me my story and then either cut me off or tell me about their weight loss or how I should lose weight or how I should find happiness or that I was doing it wrong or I wasn't eating organics. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You didn't even give me a chance to say how I did it. But it really doesn't matter. For those who know and care, that's what we're here for today. Right. For people who are maybe kind of on that path. Yeah. So, maybe I don't want to, you obviously don't have a choice. You have to listen. But for those of you who really want to make a change in your life, it's been dramatic. And I think one of the first things we can talk about is the successes in my life, things I never thought would happen to me again. Again, so let's put a little timeline on it for people. So how old are you right now? I am 53 years old. And when was it that you kind of lost, or when was this improvement or this change started? You said again, as in getting back to things again. How long ago? As odd as it may seem, I may not seem very structured, but I started my business when I was exactly 30 years old, and I started my recovery from this plight of being a horrible alcoholic who drank 3 liters a day, drank rubbing alcohol, hand sanitizer, anything I could get my hands on, not out of that I had to because I didn't have the money, but because I was lazy and fat and didn't want to go to the liquor store. So I started that at exactly 50. Okay, so it was like started at 30, and then at about 50 is when you put your foot down on yourself and kind of started to make these changes. I got divorced at about 48. Okay. I try not to think about my divorce. I don't like to focus on things that could be perceived as a failure. I'm not sure yet whether or not my divorce was a success or a failure, so
Well, that's in the eyes of, the eye of the beholder, I guess, is how you would say that. But yeah, we can kind of get back to that.
One of the things that we can focus on later is a constant in my life. I've always turned a negative into a positive. For example, the collection job. I didn't want to get into the job, but I thought, hey, there's a lot of money to be made here, so let's bring on the job. And my wife was driven by money, which I no longer see that. That's one of the things I realized by almost dying was that I almost died when I was 50. I was drinking 3 liters a day. I caught pneumonia. I thought I didn't really care, so I kept drinking harder, heavier, faster. I thought maybe I'll just die. I think that actually happened, although I can't prove it. But it brought about some real drastic changes in my life. So I thought, well, either I can die, but I couldn't die. I tried, but I didn't. And I thought, well, you know what? I may as well make a go of it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try my hardest to make a new and happy life all by my lonesome self. And if anyone wanted to join, if anyone wanted to hop on board, I was happy, but so far that hasn't happened, but I found happiness anyway.
Yeah, okay. So you have children, right? You have two children?
I have 3. I have Luke, Claire, and Brooke.
Okay, and they're all about in their late teens, early 20s, kind of?
Luke is 19, Brooke is 16, and Claire is going to be 17 on 7/7.
Okay, I think that's interesting because, for one, I think that parents can relate to that, and I also think it kind of paints the picture of a person with responsibilities to other people. I mean, it's a lot to it's one thing to say I was in a business and I was unhappy and I was drinking and I almost died, but it's another thing to say and at the same time I had the lives of 3 other people at stake, so to some extent, and so again, I just kind of like throw in painting the picture here.
Sure, and I think in painting that picture, one of the things that I haven't brought up yet is that when I got divorced, and I'm not going to get really into the story, I got divorced. I had to give away basically half of what I had, so we parsed it off, my business and her business. And then some things happened with government and cell phones where bill collecting was no longer possible through conventional means, because you can no longer call cell phones using an auto dialer. Some courts even say you can't call cell phones at all without express written permission by the consumer. That pretty much ends that job.
Right. Yeah, and so that's another huge factor. And again, to kind of paint this picture for our new audience here, we're telling stories of someone from a life who's had these ups and downs. I mean, you were a pretty successful company at some point, right? Like, I don't want to put it
very successful.
Yeah,
I've toured the world. I've been to Peru, Rome, Japan. Some of the countries several times, but I've been all over the world. Me and my wife traveled. We had a wonderful family life. And the loss of that, especially unexpectedly, just one day she came home and had met someone else quite a bit younger than her, and she said, "This is the guy for me," and that was it. And I had the kids, the business. My kids rebelled and locked her out, which shocked me, but it left me with an incredible responsibility. So if you look at the pressure that built up on me at that point, I had a divorce, I had all the kids, they would fight daily and call me, and then the business started to go down because of pressures out of my control, things I couldn't control. And I started to spiral downward. One day I thought, well, I hadn't drank for 20 years. But then one day I thought, life worked better for me drinking. I thought. So I picked up a bottle and I started drinking. It started out a shot a day, but within a month or two, it became a lot more. And then it gradually expanded to 3 liters a day.
Right. That's a lot. One thing I wanted to get back to, we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but I wanted to explain the title of this podcast to people. We forgot to explain what 3rd Ball podcast means. So the 3rd Ball is, well, you know what? This is another conversation that Stephen and I have had. It refers to pinball.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Stephen.
In an AA meeting, we were talking, and most of the time in AA meetings, I used to sit there and listen or fake listen, or I just didn't care, and I thought this is going to be a big drag. Then one day I thought, I may as well listen to these people, and someone was spewing, for lack of a better term, about how you had to go back to where you were happy in your life.
Okay.
The last time you were happy in your life. And I thought about that, and I thought, I remember playing pinball from the time I was the littlest kid, but most importantly from 8th grade till I was a senior in high school, and then the drinking age was 19. I fell away from pinball about the same time I started drinking. They were not compatible with each other because I couldn't get as high scores because I drank, and it inhibits your physical ability to play the game. So my scores were affected. It just wasn't as fun, more costly, on, and I fell away from it. And then pinball almost disappeared.
Okay.
They stopped making pinball machines. It wasn't profitable, and no companies picked it up. But then an amazing thing happened right around the same time I was sobering up, and I had a little bit of sobriety under my belt, and they were telling me to search for this point in happiness. Kind of a freakish thing happened. I was going to sing karaoke at...
Karaoke, what's karaoke?
Karaoke is...
Okay,
Karaoke. I was going to watch people sing karaoke, and sometimes I sang. For something to do, I would go out on Fridays and Saturday nights with my friend and watch karaoke. And it brought me joy, so I was doing that, and then an arcade opened up, and they had old school video games and pinball. Okay. So I decided, this is my, you have 3 stages of life. You have your early development, then you have your midlife, and then you have your last part of life. So I thought there was an incredible parallel here of this is my 3rd ball in life, and I really don't care what people think about me. Why not bring back... The 3rd ball is by far the most important in pinball. Because that's where you have to make it happen. So on that shot, on that ball, on a game, I think, what do you have to lose? So that's where the machine gets shaken. That's where... you pull out all stops. You don't mind tilting the game if you have to. Either you're going to tilt the game. The way I look at it is either the game's going to tilt or that ball's going to go down the hole. But it isn't going to be. It just isn't going to go down that hole easy. Right. So that's that. I adopted that lifestyle, and I thought I'm going to be myself whether people like it or not.
Yeah.
So that's huge. I mean,
well, and that's kind of what brings me here is, I'm looking at, Stephen, and your sort of lifestyle as an example of someone who's in their 2nd ball and, may or may not have, trepidations or challenges or struggles being themselves and, striving to achieve kind of that state of that 3rd ball where you don't care anymore. You don't care what people think, and you're going to live your life the way that you really are and the way that you should and be happy. That's the kind of thing that some people do really easily when they're in their 20s. They're in their 2nd ball, and they've already struck that they're themselves already, and it's easy. Other people, they see that and they're jealous of it, or they aspire or they're inspired to sort of get to that point. And sometimes it takes a long time or a short time to make it, and they have to work on it, and they have to kind of go through their own trials and tribulations of their second ball, so to speak, the 20s and their 30s. And but yeah, hopefully the sooner the better, more people can kind of get to that point that you're describing, that kind of disposition that you're describing.
That's a really great point, and I know we've talked about it at work before, and I think that I've kind of established another theory is I was incredibly shy. Okay. As a child, and the alcohol, it really helped me overcome shyness. Mm-hmm. And then I went through some really weird thoughts about how are people going to accept me? Are people going to accept who I am without the alcohol?
Yeah.
We all understand. And then I thought, well, you know what? People act stupid and crazy. I always acted kind of crazy when I played pinball.
You should see this guy play pinball. We'll try and get some visuals.
We could get some. I love pinball. Ever since I saw my first game, I saw he became my friend. His name was Bob Purcell, but we became friends. I saw him playing pinball, and there was a crowd of people around him. And he was pointing out the shot he was going to make and jumping around. And he was kind of inspirational to me. I thought, well, I want to be that guy. So I watched him play a few games. And I said, hey, you know what? You want to be friends? And he said, sure. And we started establishing kind of like we dance around. We were playing disco music at the time. Boogie Oogie Oogie was the top. Was the number one song, and we really connected there. And we would dance around, and people would raise eyebrows, and we developed kind of a, as odd as it may sound, if we didn't if people didn't really like our antics, as we called them, dancing around and cavorting, so to speak, after pushing the machine around, if we could see by their body language that they didn't like that behavior, we would make it our goal to subtly kind of get rid of them by acting worse. So it was real interesting. And I mean, sometimes, mothers take their kids in there to play pinball, and, the little kid will be, playing, and then they'll look over and they'll see this, people who are, you got to understand, I was a young adolescent, but, mothers would look at us like, oh my God, these people are acting strange.
Right.
I still get that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, because that was quite a sight to behold. I'll be really honest. Stephen and I, to paint, again, I love using that word, paint the picture. We met at work not even that long ago, and he invited me out to this arcade. I'm a newcomer to the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And, after kind of convincing me a couple times, he said, come on out. It's an arcade. They got plenty of video games, which I love personally. And it's a bar, so, I can have a beer or whatever after work. I show up, and dude's got so anyway.
Headphones
in. Cords coming out everywhere. There's like a light up glow stick somewhere hanging out of his pocket or in his mouth or something. He's got a sucker hanging out of his mouth. And basically
little light show for the ladies, so to speak.
And anyway, he's basically jumping up and down to the music playing and kind of cheering himself on as he's playing pinball. And again, just like he said, this is something that I guess this is part of the pinball culture and that I wasn't aware of. But the sort of grandstanding or the sort of showmanship that goes that you point out your shots and you kind of take a second. And I know people can't see my hand gestures right now, but almost like you're pointing a gun at the shot, and it adds a lot to the experience for someone just watching. It kind of adds, again, this kind of showmanship or this visual. And anyway, so that kind of back to
that's kind of a in it to you. It may not look. That's a routine that's been practiced for years.
Yeah. See, maybe I'm in the dark about it.
And even if I'm at my home alone, with no one, my wife would come downstairs and find me after she bought me a pinball machine. She took that away from me. She didn't understand that part of it was that I like to go out and play video games to entertain other people as well as myself. Pinball's interesting that way. It's you versus you versus the game. Right. You can play with other players. There's a lot of different options. But unlike a spectator sport like football that people watch on TV, you're the actual player there.
Right.
But my wife would come downstairs after she bought me a pinball machine, all hours, day of night. I love pinball that much, and I would be doing this same stuff as if someone was there, but no one was there.
I can only imagine. We're going to segue into, some of the more technical aspects of Steven's physical transformation. So you guys have heard the story about what caused, Steven's personal need for transformation. And I figured, I want to give you guys, listeners, something to walk away with. If you are at the point where you're ready to start applying, new habits to your own lifestyle, I figured I'd ask Steven, just more on the technical level, what he did, what kind of things he did. That, again, as soon as we can get some visuals to you guys, we will. Because if you looked at the picture of someone, who weighed 150 pounds.
We'll put that up on the site or something.
Yeah.
We'll have to get my driver's license pictures. I have other pictures. 300 pounds, you can like it or lump it. They still joke at the bank about how I told everyone I was going for 300 pounds, mainly to kind of annoy my ex-wife and kind of get her to leave.
That's another story.
Well, that's another story, but that was kind of But one thing I realized at 300 pounds, when I was trying to tell people, it's very difficult to get people's attentions. We live in a visual society these days.
Yeah.
And whether it be on social media or in person, if you weigh 300 pounds, people don't listen to you.
Okay.
I don't know. You probably don't realize that. It's difficult for people who have been thinner or not morbidly obese. They don't even get that you are kind of... It's very acceptable, too. People don't think about it, but if you asked a black person to pay $2 extra for a shirt, holy hell, can you imagine the fury that would go out? But you ask a guy that weighs 300 to pay $4 extra for a shirt at Walmart, well, they should, And people make comments about, maybe you should cut back. More than anything, I saw that nobody ever smiled at me, especially women. And the only women that ever smiled at me were anymore when I was 300 pounds was the cashier at the line for a buffet.
Okay.
So if there wasn't some money to be made off of me, people didn't take anything I had to say seriously. I was pretty heavily involved in politics, and I noticed that, my wife would get this incredible amount of attention. She was thin, cute, and everyone would listen to everything she had to say, even though she didn't have much to say. And I had all these incredible things to say, and people would negate me from the get-go because I was physically... unattractive.
Unhealthy.
So unhealthy. Yeah, and people perceive it as unhealthy. Even though I must say I wasn't as far as health. I was pre-diabetic. I was pre-hypertension. I was pre-everything. I had difficulty moving around my home. But that was. That was then, this is now, but it was, I didn't have any serious health implications. And I saw my friends, starting to get type 2 diabetes. I had a few people at my work that had type 2 diabetes. I thought, I don't want that. So it was time to make a change.
So, did you cut the alcohol out of your life before you started making changes to your diet and your fitness regimen?
I tried originally to drink and lose weight. I had started dieting, if you can even call it that.
Mm-hmm.
But alcohol is tricky that way because a liter of alcohol is like 1,000 calories, or a liter of booze like rum or vodka is like 1,090 calories.
Uh-huh.
So that's your whole. I thought, well, there you go. That's my diet. A bottle of booze.
So you were conscious of your weight and you wanted to change your diet, but you were still drinking.
Exactly.
It
didn't work.
It wasn't working.
And then you just break down. You drink a liter and you think, I'm going to eat a pizza.
Right.
It just wasn't going to.
Okay.
There was no way. Highly illogical, as Spock would put it, to lose weight and drink at the same time.
Okay.
So realizing that, and I'll sum it up, it boils down to diet and exercise, something I always knew.
Okay. Combining those things.
Exactly. Diet and exercise. More so the diet than exercise. And I've heard that from anyone who's successfully lost weight brings up that point. There's plenty of people out there that work out far harder than me that still their body fat has got to be off the charts. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I realized, this is big too. In AA we were talking about denial, and I was sitting there randomly thinking while other people were talking, and I thought, the same concepts of denial in alcoholism, one guy was saying in an AA meeting that he thought that if he drank chocolate milk with his rum or vodka, that he wasn't an alcoholic. I don't know how he arrived at that, but you have these incredible. You're not an alcoholic if you drink chocolate milk, or if you go to the different liquor store, people won't see you're an alcoholic. It's absurd.
Trying to rationalize.
Yes,
there's
exactly.
a word for that. Yeah.
Yeah, rationalizing it.
Yeah.
And I didn't make any bones about it as an alcoholic or a fat man. I'm like, look, I'm fat. Look, I'm an alcoholic. I would go to the same liquor store unashamed. Hey, look, just give me the fucking bottle.
Yeah.
I didn't care if it was obvious to me. I thought but then I had to overcome that denial in my life, and a big thing that happened to me, I went to the farm store, I've told you this story, to buy some shorts, and the highest size they had was size 48 waist.
Okay. The farm store is like the tractor store.
Tractor supply.
Rural.
Tractor, yes, rural. Yes,
a Walmart, like a rural Walmart.
Yeah, lower than Walmart. It's like
sure.
a farm grade Walmart, so to speak.
But it's where someone would go to buy their clothes.
Exactly. They sell, and I thought, well, that'll be perfect. I'll go get a pair of shorts there. And I went up to size 48, and they were still too tight in the belly. And my son had to leave for something, and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to buy a pair of size 48 shorts. It's already too tight in the short or in the waist. Mm-hmm. But in my head, I thought, I'm not that fat.
Yeah.
Oh, really? You can't fit into a size 48 pair of shorts from the farm store, but you're not that fat? So I had to go back in my head and say, look, I have to overcome this denial.
Yeah.
And I think back a lot to what my ex-wife told me or during the marriage, and what kind of got her to leave. And she said, you're not a bad looking guy. You're as good looking as anyone out there. You're just fat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And the truth hurts. I mean, it may seem, she said if you lost the weight, you could be attractive again. And it's something I never believed. So again, more denial. I thought, well, that'll never happen. Number one, it won't happen. And number two, I didn't think that the weight would come off and that I could look good again. And so I did some research, and I was reading about red light therapy, infrared therapy that was developed by NASA to grow plants in space, and that it would help you shrink up this excess skin from the weight loss. So you're not just looking at a product of diet and exercise. You're looking at, I went and I thought, well, where do they have this? And they had it at tanning booths. So I went into a tanning booth, got a membership, and started, got talked into tanning as well, which I was told was going to destroy my skin. But I countered the effects of the bad effects of the suntan rays, or the UV rays, the ultraviolet rays, with the infrared rays, and it worked really nice. The skin shrunk up incredibly, and it's a lasting effect. So my cheeks were starting to sag a lot. My belly, or the skin on my stomach, was hanging, and I started going in and doing the infrared or the red light therapy, and it shrunk that up. Plus, there were cute girls in there that sell you tanning products and little tanning packages and whatnot. It was always fun to go in, and they were incredibly. Those girls, my daughter's age, were as responsible for my success as anybody, because they were like, you can do it.
All right, so we're going to wrap it up right there. And in our next episode, we're going to pick up the story right where we left off, and we're going to talk about some of the people and the places. We're going to continue talking about some of the more technical aspects behind Stephen's weight loss. Thank you to the where are we? Delano
Great Regional Library.
Thank you. Yeah, and I also I wanted to give a couple shout outs to people who inspired me to create this podcast. Jocko Willink. Out there,
your hero.
I can't say much more, but we'll leave links, and we hope to connect in different ways, and especially I think the audience might connect. The similar audiences. This is all about taking control and responsibility, and defeating complacency. We're going to talk about that next episode, and just willpower. Tim Ferriss, huge inspiration for this, and he brings some science to the diet stuff that I'm going to bring to our next episode. He brings a little more of a different approach to his own diet, the one that I used to cut belly fat 2 summers ago. Got shredded to some extent. And there's a few more people who have really inspired this as well, and we'll kind of bring them into the mix.
Well, no, this is your baby, so to speak. I brought it up to you, and you brought these inspirations to the table. So yeah, they deserve a big shout out.
No, there's a few, and I really appreciate the people doing it right now. Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro. Joe Rogan. We have a plethora, and those are all different types of people, but they're all doing the same thing right now, kind of bringing awareness and kind of bringing about
talking.
Yeah, talking and
you mentioned that too, that you get a certain joy out of talking and listening to people talk.
Yeah, listening. Yeah,
that's and we can go over that again. That's another thing in the socialization, and I talked to my AA, my quasi-sponsor, so to speak, about socialization and how important that is. We're a social animal. So
okay, I got a list of everything for next week. I can't wait. All right.
Yeah, I'm excited. So
all right, thanks, Steve.
My shout out to Jacob North for making this possible.
Hey. All right, guys. I'll see you.
A man that doesn't give himself nearly as much, who's ready to give other people credit before he gives himself the credit he deserves.
Hey, I'm here for you.
That's perfect.
I'll see you next week, Steve.
All right, see you next week, Jacob.
All right.